Food, it's the lifeblood of any society. In 1906, Alfred Henry Lewis stated there are only 9 meals between mankind and anarchy, referencing the fact that all societies quickly break down if the food supply is disturbed. Today, alongside rising geopolitical tension, there has been a massive increase in prices throughout the world. And while most of these dramatic cost increases are harmful to your wallet, one in particular can be harmful to your health and well-being: the price of food. Plenty of experts are now predicting serious shortages throughout the world, and in today's video, we examine this tough outlook and take a detailed look into the food sector, determining if the preppers are right or if this is just another massively overblown storyline feeding on doom and gloom psychology. We begin with a simple foundation. While we here in the West take our food for granted, the mechanisms that allow you to choose between 50 different kinds of fruit from 10 different countries 24/7 year-round at your local grocery store are obviously incredibly complex. The foundation of this incredible human achievement that allows for essentially unlimited choice and comfortable pricing comes back to one thing: fertilizer. In today's world, without synthetic fertilizer, many of the 8 billion humans on Earth would starve to death. Now, just like everything else, fertilizer prices are spiking. In fact, if we look at the Green Market North American Fertilizer Index, a measure that captures overall fertilizer prices, we can see that costs have spiked almost 400% compared to 2019 levels, and they show no signs of slowing down. Now, much of this run-up came before the war in Ukraine, and the reason I mention that is because Russia especially provides the world with significant supplies of ammonia, which is a key ingredient in the production of fertilizer. In fact, according to the USGS, they are the second largest producer right behind China, and given the tension we have seen and the sanctions that have been imposed, it should be expected that we will see a massive drop in Russian exports to many countries throughout the world. But that's just the start. To make matters worse, there's another detail that makes the war an even more important factor that contributes to food prices. Without boring you to death, just understand that to make fertilizer, you take air, specifically nitrogen, and you combine it with natural gas, which makes ammonia the basis for nearly all fertilizer production. Now, natural gas, especially in Europe, is largely controlled by the Russians. For example, it's estimated that Germany relies on Russia for 50% of its gas imports. Take one quick look at the European natural gas prices, and you'll start to realize that this is going to get a lot worse. At current levels, the price of natural gas is 10 times more than what it was in 2019, and earlier this month it was as high as 25 times more than previous levels. Natural gas got really expensive, which means fertilizer is going to get much more expensive to produce, which means farming is going to get more expensive, and down the chain we go as food prices will ultimately suffer the same fate. But how bad can this get? Well, unlike other products, the elasticity of food prices is infinite. Given unfortunate circumstances, you will pay an unlimited amount of money for your next meal. Now that's extreme, but for many billions around the world who are living on pennies, the price of food is the difference between life and death. And that is not an exaggeration. For example, in Nigeria, it's estimated that 58% of household income is spent on feeding the family. This means in theory, if food prices doubled and wages didn't track, you would have 206 million people literally starving to death. For you and me in the West, we would complain about our $20 Big Mac, but for many around the world, that difference is the line between life and death. Infamous investor Jeremy Grantham recently conducted an interview where he claimed that we're entering a period that regardless of war will see turbulent commodity prices as the earth runs out of cheap resources. He mentions oil, nickel, and gas, but he also states that this will affect food prices. Take a listen to this quick clip. But before I show you, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you're enjoying the video thus far. Thank you.
We've had a very, very abnormal honeymoon Goldilocks period for 20 years, which I think is ending. Let me put it this way. We're in the early stages of running out of raw materials. Of course, we live on a finite planet. There's only a certain amount of cheap oil, cheap nickel, cheap copper, and we're beginning to hit some of those boundaries. And we're going to have bottlenecks here, there, and everywhere. The food price index of the UN is about as high as it gets. Growing food is not getting easier. Climate change is coming with heavy floods, serious droughts, and higher temperatures. None of these make farming easier. So we're going to live in a world of bottlenecks and shortages and price spikes, and we have to get used to it and learn to manage our way around it.
Now that we understand some of the foundational problems stemming from these price hikes, let's go back to the start where I mentioned how this would affect you. My assumption is that you're watching this from a developed English-speaking nation in the West, and based on my demographics, you're likely a 35-year-old male from the United States. In this case, only your wallet is likely to suffer, and if you think your grocery bill is high now, get ready to lower your savings. The whole prep thing is a bit overblown, and I'm sure I'll lose subscribers by saying this, but if food prices become a starvation problem in the world's richest nation, you'll have a much bigger issue when your neighbors find out you're storing 2 tons of flour in your basement. However, on the other side of the world, in continents like Africa, the future looks grim. Doomberg, an anonymous writer who I believe to be an expert on commodity pricing, has a much darker outlook on the situation. He claims millions will die as a result of this. Take a listen to him on the Jason Hartman podcast. I've linked the full episode in the description below.
I think in early 2022, we are going to see first in the poorer countries, but eventually finding its way to sort of the Western democracies, we're going to see massive price spikes in food. And history teaches us that 9 meals to crazy is the old expression from the prepper community. Once people can't afford to pay food, forget about the landscaper that can't afford to pay the gas to get to his or her clients. Yeah. When you can't feed your family, that's when it gets real. And I believe we're already beginning to see some of the consequences of that. So I think the story of 2022 will be a food inflation and food supply crisis story that is directly born from the energy crisis that we're seeing today.
Any idea what those inflation numbers look like? I know it's a speculation, of course, but
so if you want
how bad could that be?
Pull up a piece that we wrote called Starvation Diet.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about copper there, so maybe we'll get back to that if we have time.
Scroll up. There it is right there. Yep. So Starvation Diet is our prediction all the way back in October, by the way. This piece was published in October. So you stop right there. That's the 20-year chart of the price of fertilizer. It's now at $11.50 on this chart, if you can believe it. So, just compared to, this is North American fertilizer has tripled in price since pre-COVID.
Wow.
And so what you're going to see is farmers planting less or farmers using less fertilizer, and therefore yields being lower, and the price of food skyrocketing. And this is, I don't know how high it could go. Like the price elasticity of demand for food is infinite, and the richest people will pay anything. Jason Hartman is going to buy groceries. The price when you check out is, I wouldn't say you're agnostic to it, but you will prioritize food over anything. And so you will pay the price.
So in summary, yes, commodity prices have a massive impact on food, so much so that millions are in danger of starvation. But here in the prosperous West, this is likely never going to be more than just a financial and political issue. It's going to hurt wallets, start protests, and change policy, but the danger of starvation is far away. Americans spend only 6% of their income on food, and these stats show that even if food prices quadrupled, they would avoid the ultimate danger, starvation. But obviously, in such a scenario, there will be other widespread issues stemming from this change. In countries where food costs take up the majority of average income, the change is going to be profound. As Alfred Henry Lewis has stated, there are only 9 meals between mankind and anarchy. And we've seen countless revolutions take place in countries where food becomes simply too expensive to survive. The same could happen in these places given the correct unfortunate circumstances. Thank you guys for watching. As always, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed it.